I'm Matt Landau from VRMB, and this is Unlocked, Season 8, First Mover Status. Today's episode features Paul Waldschmidt, the co-founder and CEO of OwnerRez, which is a property management software that's been quietly yet confidently building and serving its customer base for over 10 years. And if you know vacation rental software, you know OwnerRez has something of a silent power. Within VRMB Communities, which is our private forum, it has probably more raving fans than any other property management software. I'm talking users who go out of their way to champion this software on the regular. And it's not just in our community. There's an unofficial OwnerRez Facebook group that has these fiercely loyal users who help each other get the most out of the product. In fact, OwnerRez has been so historically uninterested in advertising that they only just attended their first conference. Shout out to Paul #2 and Glenn, who I met in both Oregon and in Chicago. This is why I wanted to interview their founder on starting with one property, building a team, and being healthily belligerent on your journey and growth on your terms. This episode's brought to you by Point Central, the leaders in smart home automation, and Breezeway, a property care and operations platform. Like with every episode this season, I've kicked off by asking Paul, what does first mover status mean to you?
The thing about the whole first mover status or first mover advantage is I think it's really kind of there's obvious advantages when it's real, but I think there's also a lot of times when it's not real. And so 70% of the time, 75% of the time, it actually works against you. So I know that, a lot of people want to be first mover. They want to be Uber in whatever space they're in. They want to be Google. They want to be, QuickBooks. But looking around, I think that a lot of people who are trying to get to that status or trying to position themselves to have that advantage are doing it through funding, right? And they're not doing it because they've innovated into a first mover position. So if I think back about, Google, who was clearly a first mover in the search space, who, everybody wanted to be with, or Uber, who, set, governments into a tizzy. They had real innovation, they had real technology. And so people wanted to, people want to be that in that position, but are you actually really a first mover by technology, or are you just trying to fund and grow your way into being the biggest name and the biggest noise in the space?
I love that. You have officially dismantled my entire theme for this season, and I absolutely love it. And it reminds me of a conversation I had not too long ago. And Robin Cragen of Moving Mountains, he said, first mover is great and all, but the second mouse is the one that gets the cheese. And I didn't understand that immediately. And he said the first mouse going to get the cheese gets trapped. So it's a really nice way of putting an opposite perspective on what we've been focusing on this season. Do you consider yourself a first mover in this space?
No, definitely not. Because again, it's, I think this theme will come up throughout the conversation, but we do not invest or have a growth strategy that you would need to have really to try and be a first mover in the vacation rental space, in the vacation rental software space. Unless we came out with something that just like completely, revolutionized or turned everything around or made everyone rethink, channel distribution or one of our verticals. And we don't have that. That's not how we've moved into the position that we're in. And that's not how we've achieved success. And my long-term goals, Chris and I's long-term goals, I should say, are about the health and the happiness of our customers and our team. And so, we're not looking for, growth at all cost. We're not looking to try and push ourselves into being that name and being in that position because we don't really see any value in it. In fact, I think it can be suicide for a lot of companies to try and focus on that. Unless again they came to it honestly, right? If you're QuickBooks and you turn the world on fire because you gave really good, really simple accounting tools to businesses, or you're Google and your search results are personalized and super fast, and everybody wants to be doing what you're doing. Well, then that's an honest first mover position.
You started your vacation rental journey with what sounds like a very honest crossroads. Some of my favorite companies were started because the founder or creator couldn't find what they needed. Share how you entered this whole thing.
It was kind of it's the traditional labor of love story where you go out and you stay at a rental, and this is great. This is how I want to spend my weekends, and so you see some opportunities in the area. And my wife and I saw a really cute little cabin on the river. We called it Bear Valley, and so we bought that. Needed a ton of work, and we did a ton of stuff wrong. We probably spent 50,000 more than we should have. Um, but it worked. And the focus on having a really good experience and keeping it simple really worked. And so it kind of fueled us to do it again. And then we did it again. And I think we grew. We've sold a few now, but over the years I think we grew to 12, something like that. um, and we're back down to 4 or 5 now. But during that process, of looking for property managers and looking for good software, we figured, hey, we could hack together some stuff to work for us. And then being software engineers, we wanted to build it better. We wanted to, we got more interested in the software side. And then my wife ended up taking that and building a company on the cabin side, and she now has about 40 properties under management, including our 4 or 5. And we talk about it all the time. There's the phrase, a couple years ago people would use WWJD, what would Jesus do? There used to be like the bracelets, the necklaces people would wear. And Chris and I internally have a phrase, WWSRD, what would Shenrent do? And Shenrent's the name of my wife's company that manages these cabins. And so often in design meetings or tasking meetings, we'll think about, what would Shenrent do in this situation as a smallish PM, but with its fingers in things like trust accounting and paying out owners and reporting and channel management and website. What does it need? And so it's been great because, as anyone knows in the software industry, if you're able to use your own product, there's a term for that called dog fooding, eat your own dog food. If you're able to do that, your success, your ability to connect with your customers, I mean, you have a significantly higher rate of success.
So it's a good thing, eating your own dog food.
It is.
Okay, good. Just be sure.
Yeah, there's been essays around the dog food concept. I'm not sure who first came out with that, but dog fooding is a term in the software industry. So
Okay. Well, I do know that getting high on your own supply is a bad thing. It's looked down upon. You develop this kind of performance within the organization, this quality. I actually met at 2 conferences over the course of the last few weeks, senior team members who also manage their own properties. So you've really zoomed in on this quality over quantity thing. But talk to me about where the performance and these standards and this commitment to it intersects with the big thing that technology is supposed to do these days, and that's speed.
yeah, so speed is a feature, and again, there's been papers written about that in the software world too. But years ago, people would use phrases like, why do you like Google better? And Yahoo did studies on this when they had their love hate relationship with Google. For a while, Yahoo search was powered by Google. I'm talking 20 years ago. And then Google became its own thing, and people would just go to Google and cut out Yahoo. And Google did studies on this, and the reason people would just say, well, Google just quote unquote works better. It works better, right? I'm not sure why. It's just, is it relevance? Is it whatever? And there's been a number of studies. There's been a number of articles written on the concept of how software feels when it's performant. Speed is a feature. So Google found out years ago that um, if you load pages with 10 results instead of 30, response time is cut in half. You shave off, it's like zero point 0.4 seconds or something. And as a result, uh, people's success rate goes up. People stay there longer. Amazon found the same thing when they decreased the amount of content on pages and they increased speed. They had like a 200% growth in revenue when they were doing A/B testing between pages that did and did not have that. A common thing we see about OwnerRez, we monitor a number of like unaffiliated, unofficial forums where people talk about OwnerRez and the unofficial forum here and there, and it makes us smile all the time. We take screenshots internally and show them to each other, where people will say, fill in the blank competitor. Yeah, I went there for a while, but OwnerRez just works better, just faster, just reliable. This other place, oh, they had a nicer website. They look prettier. OwnerRez still is more of a functional design, but man, it just works. You know, our attrition rate is extremely low. Um, we also measure people who've left and come back, and so that understanding that speed is a feature, performance matters. How fast you recognize bugs, track them, and patch them same day if you can, same week if not. Um, Users feel that, customers feel that. It's very they're very aware of it. Whether or not they can put it into words, they know that your system works really quickly, pages load quickly, that your pipeline between you and channels or your partners works really well. They have it kind of as a sixth sense, and so Chris and I brought that to OwnerRez when we built OwnerRez. I remember back in the day working on something called a second layer cache. Again, trying not to get real nerdy here in the conversation, but
It sounds like a dessert.
yeah, it's not. It's a really boring way of saving data so that you don't need to make changes until you actually need to make changes in terms of how software systems store things when you make changes, when you change a property's photos or change some rules or settings, where that data is actually stored. Um, but you typically wouldn't optimize to that level, to that speed, unless you're working on a major media website that is getting 20, 30 million page views a day. But because Chris and I had that in our DNA, we brought that to OwnerRez, and I think from the beginning there's been that sense that speed is a feature. Our commitment to performance is very high, and it's something that we haven't sacrificed as we've grown.
So, what do you say to somebody who's listening who's not a partner of yours using another website or property management software, or not even in our industry? What is the best tool, ideally free, and or next steps to take to assess your speed?
Yeah, so there's general software tools you can use. I'm trying to think of what the more modern ones are. They've changed a lot over the years, but there are a lot of general, website speed checking tools. If you're a PM with your own like website builder, you can use response time tools. Pingdom is one that offers uptime checks, and they'll tell you over time how fast your website is compared to others. So yeah, there's another site, Ahrefs, that does a lot of deep analysis on comparing it's so many things, thousands of things, different attributes on whether or not your website is broken links and very basic things to how well you're performing against your competitors. They'll actually recommend a list of competitors just by checking your keywords and recognizing what industry you're in. So Ahrefs is good, but there's a lot of tools out there. A lot of them mix with the SEO world. So if you're looking at SEO tools and you're looking at your website, whatever system it's on, whatever competitor, whatever channel system you use, PMS system you use, you can do analysis, independent, objective analysis, and see, you know, response times and whether or not. Yeah, this is a really broad conversation, right? So I mean, you can get into seeing how also your visitors or your guests are bouncing off of your site, what your bounce times are compared to other industry websites. So I don't know if that answers your questions or not, but there are a number of really good tools.
Yeah, it does. I actually remember hiring a service to come in and examine how fast my website was, and they provided a handful of next steps to speed up the process. And I remember at the end of the process, we were like more than 150% faster. And I remember corresponding that investment with things like more time on site, better conversion. So I see exactly how it's not necessarily obvious upfront, but when you are fast, your users buy more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about pricing when you are doing a business that is focused on quality. The price is different than a commodity or something that's just looking to scale. I think a lot of our listeners fall into this category. They're looking to run and offer limited edition style vacation rental homes. They want to command the most money for them, but at the same time, they want to offer value. And I'm curious from an OwnerRez perspective, when you're presenting this tool to owners and managers, what was the process like to figure out what people should pay and why?
The pricing problem that we faced was, um, so again, we came at this from as software guys who knew how to build stuff, but more limited on the business side, in terms of pricing and scaling and that kind of thing. So the pricing problems that we faced here were learning how to value ourselves and learning how to um, get inside the minds of our users from their standpoint and understand the pricing psychology that your typical user goes through, which is interesting because we're all users ourselves, right? I mean, I subscribe to any number of SaaS apps online on my phone, and I'm willing to pay for all kinds of things, and so are other people. But one of the ways we wanted to just separate ourselves early on was to have like a usage based model. So coming from the software world where we were used to paying usage pricing for things like AWS, which is a big data cloud run by Amazon, and in those worlds, everything is based on volume. Everything's based on fractions of a penny, but it's scales, and so you're looking at reporting on how much you're using. And so we priced ourselves completely out of business early on. We were pricing, like we were creating this psychology in our users, which was if you don't have bookings or the bookings don't originate through OwnerRez as direct bookings, then they're free. And then bookings that did originate through direct bookings, website bookings, widget bookings in OwnerRez were like $5, $10, depending on how much you had per month. So you created right off a mentality in users to compete with you to not have direct bookings. So if they could call a booking a Vrbo booking or an Airbnb booking, then it was free. If they could block off time and not have it be an official booking, then it was free, which was silly. And it doesn't matter because if you're a PM and you're used to paying the thousands of dollars you're paying for all your other costs per month, why do you care about a small software cost? And they didn't care, which we found out later.
How'd you find that out?
In 2016, I think, or 2017, Chris and I sat down and went, look, we're struggling to pay the bills here. We know we have something really good, but this is silly. Like no one wants to leave. People are telling friends, but we don't have the budget to advertise and grow because we're not making any money. So we eventually, in reading some books and just kind of getting a good look at it, and basically coming to grips with if this is going to work, then we need to ask people to pay a lot more, which didn't end up being that much actually. But value this and commit to it mentally. This isn't a seasonal tool. This is not some set of tools that you can pull out or put away that don't matter. This is your business foundation. You're running your day-to-day operations on it. This matters. It's important. So we just changed the pricing around. We went to a minimum per month. We were at the time we did some internal analysis, and no matter how small you were, the cost of support, the cost of business in general. We needed $20 a month, I think was our number, $19 a month minimum from anyone who touches our system. And then obviously we scaled up, or we had tiered out from there. But we determined that no matter how small you were, no matter how easy you were to support, no matter if you were just a homeowner with a seasonal beach property that had very little needs, the cost of webinars, advertising, growth, there had to be a certain minimum. Which I know it sounds simple now, right? How couldn't it? But 6 years ago, I guess now, it was kind of hard for him and I to come to that realization for some reason. And so, but once we did, we hit the ground running, and from that point forward, it was very, it just started working. It was probably our first and most important evolution milestone in terms of really getting onto the path of success that led to now.
And what advice do you have for somebody, ideally not in the software space, who feels like what you just described may apply to them? They have a pricing problem. What's the best way to unpack it and get to the root?
If you want long term to have a thriving team, if you want long term to enjoy what you do every day, there's got to be some minimal amount of capital to get you there, some minimal amount of cash flow specifically to get you there. Which again, all sounds obvious, right? But in the moment when you're trying to get users and you're going out trying to create happiness and try and meet everyone's needs, it can be hard to think about that in a really surgical way, in a really clean way. So start with that. Think about how this tool or how your product helps yourself, what you'd be willing to pay, and then don't assume other people wouldn't either. Don't assume that that when faced with the choice to commit or not, that they're going to look at it and go, well, you've increased your price, or you've now set a minimum, or you set some barrier to entry or some commitment level, and I'm gonna close up and leave, and I'm gonna push away 30% of who was using me because I set this up. And in some cases, pushing away 20-30%, it can be good, because you're also pushing away 20 or 30% of people or customers with a certain mindset, who bring maybe support problems, who don't value what you're doing the same way you are. So, start with that in mind. Start with, the end goal of where I want to be is a happy, thriving team. I want to enjoy what I do long term, and I value this. And so, what I'd be willing to pay, I'm going to expect someone else to be willing to pay. Start with that as a fundamental principle, and then build from there.
And I'm guessing a higher price encourages somebody to value the product more. But have you found any additional ways to get people to, as you put it, commit mentally?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that was all just the starting place, and really we were valued still way low. It actually started to bother us because, like I said, these unofficial forums and places where we watch users talking to each other and sharing information or feedback that's sent to us directly. One of the common things back in the day was, oh, it's great. They'd run through the list, blah blah blah, and then at the very end, you'd always hear them say, and they're like bargain basement pricing, like this is so cheap. And at first, it was like,
So, listeners, if you've ever heard this feedback, now is when your ears should perk up. Go on, Paul.
yeah, really. So and at first, like, yeah, so we're beating, we've not fixed our cash flow problem, but we've created serious cash flow. We've created a growth plan, and then it started, and we still got a lot of room to compete, because this is, that you can clearly see people, or at least, the customers, I hate to say the customers that matter, but the ones that, the more serious customers, are saying there's still, a lot of room and they're still happy. And you start realizing, like, well, okay, you're not only leaving money on the table, which that doesn't so much matter, but you're creating a image. And the pricing psychology thing is really, really interesting. I mean, there are whole books, and there are whole little ecosystems built around this. But when you start to value yourself higher, and you start to paint an image that's higher, and that's more prestigious, exclusive, even though I would say we're not in that space, but the psychology follows. And, I'm sure you guys have seen this interviewing others and reading books and across many industries, this has been the case. But um, you really can paint an image for yourself one way or another unintentionally that can cause people to either come to you or leave based simply on that image, no matter what your actual value is.
Here are two tools that epitomize the theme of first mover status, the kind of products and services that actually give you unfair advantages over your competition. Point Central provides smart property solutions for smart vacation property managers. They help streamline operations, protect the property, and enhance the guest experience using keyless access. Why? Because guests are tired after traveling, duh. And being able to go directly to that property with keyless access instead of stopping at a manager's office, this is no longer a luxury. This is a standard practice. Plus, everybody loves avoiding extra trips due to lost keys, not to mention the constant cost of rekeying. Point Central partners stay aware with an activity log of who enters and leaves the property, which helps keep track of cleaning and maintenance crews as well. You can also gain control of your utility bills with their smart thermostats. Schedule set points so guests won't be able to drastically raise or lower the temperatures, for instance. You can ensure the temperature stays consistent when the unit is vacant. Prevent costly maintenance projects caused by water leaks, mold, or HVAC issues with real-time alerts that allow you to be proactive. Visit pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. And Breezeway, whose property care and operations platform helps you coordinate, communicate, and verify the detailed work and deliver the best service experience to your guests. With tools for intelligent task scheduling, quality assurance, real-time work coordination, guest messaging, supplies management, owner reporting, and more, oh my! Breezeway helps thousands of short-term rental managers and hospitality operators increase your operational efficiency and eliminate hours of manual work. This allows you to boost your service revenue. It was created by the founding team of FlipKey, which was since acquired by TripAdvisor, and Breezeway is just elevating the experience at every property they touch. Visit breezeway.io/VRMB and get implementation fees waived. That's a $1,000 value right there. Okay, let's get back to the show. Speaking maybe a little more technically about integrations, I want to start off by asking you, what's something that you think not all owners and managers understand or know about channel managers?
Yeah, so channel managers is really any piece of software, whether it's a PMS like ours that has channel management built in, or it's a standalone exclusive channel manager, someone like Booking Pal, Rentals United, SiteMinder, who they specialize in only doing that. So they live in the middle, basically. These are sometimes called middle channel managers or third-party channel managers. But channel management, whoever builds it and wherever it is basically the process of connecting a master record. So wherever the property and photos and availability are for the owner or the PM, connecting that to many different online OTAs or channels, distribution endpoints. So Vrbo, Airbnb, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, and so on. The places where guests will naturally gravitate towards to book your property, which, like it or not, is very often not your website. It's one of these big international booking websites. It might even end up out on Google or Priceline or somewhere else because those known vacation rental channels themselves have distribution partnerships with other channels. So a channel manager obviously seeks to simplify that so that the master record for the property and for the property data goes to all of those places accurately all at once. When a photo is changed, or you add a caption to a photo, or you change rates for a night, as soon as possible, you want that change flowing out to all of those places, all those Vrbo, Airbnb places. So the channel manager seeks to simplify that and make it so that the master record gets there, but also wherever those bookings are, they get back to the PMS system or wherever the master record is, the master system for managing your bookings.
And so do you guys work with channel managers?
So we have our own channel management system built into OwnerRez. We are a channel manager. We spent a long time coming down that road and building those relationships. It's not an easy path to go down, both because there's a big technology hurdle. There's a lot of data and a lot of what are called APIs that you have to integrate with. But also you have to get Vrbo, Airbnb, Booking.com, these big players to talk to you directly. So in getting back to the original question of what is something that they don't know the most about channel management. I mean, there's a number of different things I could say there, but the reason I go with the process that's involved and how long it takes, how many steps it takes for the data to steer its way out to Vrbo and Airbnb is because what a lot of software companies have done in this space, or PMSs have done in this space, is they've either white labeled or they've integrated with these middle channel managers, these third-party channel managers. And that really that allows the PMS to say that they support channel management, but in a way that gives up all of the power, all the flexibility, all of the speed to a different system. And so the experience is really typically very poor when that's the case. And sometimes you don't know if the PMS you're on actually is using a third party channel manager to, to manage the process. So that's a question I would ask. Are you a direct channel manager? And if you are, with which of the major OTAs, meaning Vrbo and Airbnb? Or have you created your own relationship? You've talked to the folks at Austin, in Austin, Texas, at Vrbo, or the folks in San Francisco at Airbnb. You meet with them on a regular basis. You have a direct relationship with their development teams, and you know exactly what's going on between, the PMS system, the master record, and how that data gets to the other side, and how that the bookings and the guest interaction on that side comes back to your system.
One of the things that I've noticed, not all owners and managers know about integrations in general, is that oftentimes the more popular companies charge fees, and these are not insignificant fees. They could be tens of thousands of dollars, if not even more. And when I first learned about this practice, and to be very clear, this is a, let's say, property management company charging a third-party tool for the integration. Or, I don't know, Paul, if this takes place, a large OTA charging a property management software for the integration. Does that ever take place?
It's interesting you bring this up. I was in a conversation the other day. I mean, it's almost like you have a microphone in my office or something, because I was actually talking to my team the other day about this. So it does actually happen. I've avoided that as much as possible. And by avoiding it, I mean, OwnerRez is now in a position where we can charge other companies to integrate with us. We have an open auth, it's called API system, which means that you can basically, anyone in the world can basically build an app for OwnerRez. You might know the experience from Facebook or Twitter, where you go to connect your account and it says log into Twitter or log into Google. Do you authorize fill in the blank app to work with? And you say yes, and it manages a permission model. So we have that with OwnerRez. You can build OAuth apps for OwnerRez, and we have hundreds of apps that have been built for OwnerRez, of which more than 70 are official partners. So it's been a big ecosystem. It's been great. Coming back to the conversation though, so we've, in trade shows and stuff recently, we've been talking to people who talk about rev shares and contracts and, what does it cost to integrate? And we routinely kind of blow their socks off when we say it's free. There is no cost to integrate. And now I'm talking about cost to integrate with OwnerRez. As long as you have a partner account, as long as you follow our, API and app docs, we don't charge you anything. Anyone can, there's some certification that we do to become an official partner. There's some testing that goes on.
And do they pay for that?
Nope, they don't pay for that. So There's a standard that we get to if we're going to do a webinar with you, a standard of how many users that you've generated. So if you build an app and you have 5 users that are mutual customers between your app and OwnerRez, and you would do a webinar tomorrow, unfortunately we can't commit those type of resources. But there's some levels that we will go to for free to certify and test the app, and help you with it a little bit. And that's typically for named official partners, not, there's a lot of apps out there where people have just built just to kind of hack up their own data, or because they're in a region and they're sharing information with people in their area. But we routinely get this question, what does it cost? And it does go on. It's actually pretty large in some cases. Some of our competitors charge, I've heard, as much as $50,000 to get a first class partner connection with them. But that this is part of a broader conversation, but we're not interested in what I consider to be short-term revenue gains. And we're more interested in a long-term, creating a long-term foundation and ecosystem.
And back to something you said earlier, when you hear somebody saying you're not charging enough, that probably means you should be charging more. In this particular instance, people are saying, you don't have a fee? We're happy to pay you a fee. Is that because the mission of the company and the way that the revenue streams are structured, these API charges, even though you could charge them if you wanted, don't sit at the very top?
I think so. I think some of it's also they're used to. I'm trying not to name a lot of names here, but they're used to dealing with some of the older, more established PMS systems in the industry, and who have created these barriers. And I think some of it's also that they're just used to dealing with some others. So when they come to us, I think we're very much disrupting in this space. Um, Not intentionally, not as a trendy or gimmicky thing. I think it's just the natural result of some of what we're doing, bringing people first culture, bringing speed, bringing what I call a real software team. Um, I think it's disrupting. They're just not used to that.
So one could say you are first mover status with that.
Yeah, we're kind of circling back to that, aren't we?
I don't know, maybe. I want to talk a little bit about this broader culture that you talk about, because I think it's something that really resonates with property owners and managers, since most of the people listening to this are not software CEOs or vendors. With technology and startups and traditionally investors, it's easy to have lots of turnover because the short-term gains are front and center. How do you guys focus on people? Because I've noticed that every person who loves OwnerRez that uses it, and every person that works for OwnerRez that I've met, seems to be a great person. They just seem to be wholesome and positive. Not to say that people who are using other tools are not. But is this something that is built into the way that you guys do business, out of curiosity?
Yeah, it is. So I used the term earlier, people first culture, and I didn't invent that. There's I think Harvard Business Review did a book on that, and Falcone wrote a book on it. Wildbit is a company in Philadelphia I follow. Great team. They've been around for like 25 years. They talk about it as well. But being people first means the point of the company is not profits and growth. It's happiness with people, which sounds kind of cliche and gimmicky, but it's not just your customers, not just kind of the old school customers always right model, but your own team. So does your company exist just for growth, with sort of a pump and dump mentality? Or are you trying to create something long term? Do you want the team to thrive? So, that, and at first, actually, someone internally asked me a long time ago, kind of cynically, okay, but everyone puts that on their website. It's like, oh, we believe in diversity and inclusivity and blah, blah, blah. Right. We get it. Put it on the website. Let's move on. And I stopped them. I said, no, this is real. And they said, okay, but how do you demonstrate that it's real? And I stopped and I thought about it. I was like, well, that's kind of hard, isn't it? How do you demonstrate when there's a sea of people saying things like this? How do you demonstrate? And what I've realized over time is you demonstrate it by being really transparent and by saying things that are hard to back out of. So we increased prices last year. our to our users, our main pricing. I think our minimum is 35 now, and our top end went up, and some other things. We repackaged channel management to be free for everyone, built in. Um, and I wrote an essay at the time, which I think people really responded to really, really well, about why we needed to increase prices.
And by the way, I absolutely love how the founder of a software company is writing an essay for his users. Go on.
And I do it all the time. You get bored if you follow me. But anyway, um, so in the process, I talked about how a people first culture, among other things, and that's the part about being transparent is writing the essay. But the people first culture, among other things, requires financial responsibility, because Chris and I can't take care of our team, and we can't think about the future if we are totally focused on growth at all costs. If we're making decisions that aren't financially responsible to keep the control and the vision where it is, what will end up happening is outside investors that are always trying to beat our door down, they'll get in, they'll buy up a piece of the company, there'll be an acquisition of some kind, and they'll start setting the agenda. And we've seen that ourselves and in other walks of life Chris and I have had. This isn't our first time around. So if you want long-term happiness in the team, if you really want to thrive, if you really want to keep the company, privately owned and controlled, and keep the philosophy train on its tracks, then you have to make serious financial decisions that promote financial responsibility, and sometimes that means raising your prices. And I think that kind of honesty did several things. It showed to our customers, there was transparency there, so they could understand why we were making the decision. But it also showed them very openly, very nakedly, that we're in this for the long term, because I just made a really big statement.
Right. There's no backing out of this.
There's no backing out of it. And I did it again in another essay earlier this year about a growth, our commitment to support in some things, because we've had so much growth. We were catching wind of some conversations about, well, OwnerRez is so big and they're growing so much, the support times are slowing down, and that kind of same type of thing. I said again, is in the hiring process and managing growth, our commitment is the same, and we are trying to be financially responsible in terms of how we hire. You can't just go hire 15 people or outsource your support to some other company or to some other system just to kind of handle it, quote unquote. If you want to keep the philosophy and the long-term vision the same, there's some pain that has to be experienced now and then.
And so what was the statement that you made on that front, on the growth front?
Similarly, that our growth, we're committed to the growth. And while our size has changed, our commitment hasn't. So we're still people first, in the sense that we're hiring, but we're hiring slowly, and we're hiring based on pain points. This is something else that you and I talked about, that, you can hire for projected growth. You can hire for, hey, I'm going to be this size at the end of the year, so I need to double my sales team, and I need to, double my support team. Or you can hire for pain points, which means you have to experience the pain points yourself as founders. You have to be doing calls and pro connect and onboarding and doing connected with the engineering team, and you have to be doing all this stuff yourself, so you see where there's real pain, so you can see who you really need to hire. Coming full circle back to talking, interviewing a lot of people, understanding who's ready and capable to really address those pain points, who has the experience, and who wants to do that long term, who wants to be here with us helping to build out the team.
The episode just before you, featuring Miles Chu, who's the marketing manager at Compass Resorts in Destin, Florida. Miles talks about, as a marketing manager, how valuable it is for him to go down to the ground floor. They have check-in desks in several of their buildings, and to interact with guests and to observe things and ask questions, and perhaps most importantly, listen to what they are asking, what kind of pain points they do have. And he found that that was not only a big eye-opener in terms of what could enhance the guest's stay, but it also got him thinking, like, wow, I actually possess all this information about the area. I have friends who have kids who take their kids to this park on the bayside that's way better for kids than on the ocean. It made him realize that he was a vault of local information that he had actually never shared, and that had wonderful implication in his marketing campaign. So is this something that you kind of encourage any vacation rental professional to do, get down to the ground level and interact with people in order to see what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's you could expand it or extrapolate it out to business at large across any industry. But I think, and again, it gets back to your philosophy. Are you long term focused? Are you value focused? Or are you just looking to build, grow, and sell? But absolutely, PMs that talk to guests directly and who travel around to their units, to their properties. Um, what would Shenrent do, right? Getting back to my wife's company. We're there. She's smaller. She's, like I said, has about 40. Purposely keeps it small, I think, partially for this reason. She's very careful about the owners and properties that, she wants to wrap her arms around. She's a very naturally loving, very naturally warm person. So that comes with a price, but so it's very easy for her to do this. And I think it's harder maybe for others, but being able to really wrap your arms around the individual, and not just the guests, but your cleaners, your staff, your vendors, the guy who mows the lawn, um, neighbors, absolutely neighbors. That pays off hugely. Um, so there's no question being hands on, and you don't have to be. That's the other thing that I've noticed. Chris and I have noticed that too on our end is, being hands on is not all or nothing, right? So it's not like in the first years of the business, you're hands on because you have to be. And then as you grow and you build out teams, you can have other people be hands on for you and you get a little bit of breathing room, but then you have other problems. You have more paperwork and you have mergers and banking and other stuff that you're dealing with. And I think the problem a lot of PMs get into, company executives get into, is once you leave the hands on part behind, and once you move into a different stage, kind of with like a sigh of relief, um, you're doing it wrong then as well. But you don't need to go back to being fully hands on. You can do it part of the time. You can, every Thursday visit with a couple of properties. You can pick up the phone and probably like your friend in Destin. He may not have the time to be hands on every second of the day, but it should definitely be on your calendar as a regular thing you're doing every few days or every week.
Every time I meet a property manager who's starting to feel burned out or a property owner who's looking for inspiration, I encourage them to make a trade with another property owner or property manager and go and stay in that property. That's a wonderful way to learn. But another way is to block off a couple nights in the home and to do a sleep through. This is Michael Skinner, member of our community's term, sleep through, in which he encourages members of his team to go and stay in new properties so they know the quirks and what works and what doesn't. But I think it is a huge overlooked thing that's just sitting there, the chance to go and stay in one of your own properties, be a guest, figure out, make a dinner, make a family dinner, and see that perhaps something isn't there that you would have used. I think people oftentimes get cliche with this, putting ourselves in the shoes of our guests, but it really works.
Absolutely does. It's almost like dog fooding your own software, right? You're you're using it yourself. You're seeing if the shower really has the pressure and the hot water that you think it does. And my wife and I talk about that. We used to more, but still occasionally about new owners that come on our new properties. Is, oh boy, it's the new property effect. It's the first couple bookings, or there's going to be questions, there's going to be problems, and largely that goes away when over time. And it's not just a new property thing; it comes and goes. But the the properties that where a owner goes and stays at on a regular basis, and absolutely PM should as well. You see such dividends from that.
You have a unique window into a pretty broad range of vacation rental company sizes. I'm guessing you have plenty of people with one property and you have probably have plenty of people with hundreds. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, we run larger at the small end because that was originally our DNA. So we still have a real long tail where there's a big bubble between between 1 and 10, and then starter space, what we call the starter PM space, which is like 10 to 20, 10 to 25. You're starting to get away from your own properties and get into managing your friends or starting to establish as a business. And then medium and large. But yeah, we have a couple we've got a couple that are real big in the thousands. And then, but we're building more in the medium and large PM space right now.
So, what do you observe about these kind of plateaus that might be actionable for people who are moving from one into the next?
At plateaus, meaning,
I use that phrase casually, but I only just learned it sitting at VRMA in Chicago. I heard Bob Oakes of Village Realty use the phrase profit plateau to describe the stage at which a property management company is less efficient with his resources as it relates to profit. And he benchmarked a couple sort of property counts at which there seemed to be a plateau. Have you noticed anything similar?
that's an interesting term. Yeah. It's, I've noticed it mostly in the smaller end, transitioning from, um, homeowner mode, 1 to 3 properties, going into that squishy in between space where you want to be a starter PM or a small PM, but it's hard to get over that hump because you're basically doing everything depending on your market, depending on your properties and the your averages per night. You're going to be doing everything and farming out, contracting, maintenance. We have noticed that as well. It's really what that's interesting. The plateau. I've got to like jot that down and think about it a little bit more. But what's interesting for me is getting back again to our company, Shenrent, my wife's company. Um, that's actually what pushed us to expand because we realized that you could pay for someone to work the front desk to manage calls and guest relations. You could also pay for a full-time maintenance person, like a salary full-time maintenance person, and you could be more efficient if you pushed yourself from say 10 up to like 20 or 25. So if you can get friends who go, man, you have really high booking rates and I'd like to book with you sometime, you can collect all their contact info and push yourself from that, you know say portfolio of 8 where I've been investing for a while, but oh my god, this is taking me away from my real job, this is becoming its own business. If you can push hard from 8 to up to like mid 20s or 20 even, at that point, if they're good owners, good properties, and you're maintaining your brand, um, at that point you have the revenue and the margins to start helping yourself, breathe a little bit, and you're not running around crazy. But the plateau, that's a very interesting term.
Hmm. And over the years, have you observed um, any companies in the space, specifically on the tech side, that you especially admire outside of naturally your own?
Um, it's changed a little bit over time. I'm actually
Yeah.
struggling here off the cuff to come up with some quick names for you. I know some outside the industry that I follow, but thinking about, there are a couple that I think are positioned like we are and have similar philosophies that we are, and I want to be careful because I don't know this 100% and I haven't seen as much people first or transparency or things like that, but I know there are ones that are very value based, that are very support based. Engineering is, the company's led by engineering. I see that, just to name one, with Price Labs. We like those guys a lot. I think that the value they bring is significant, on their side of the industry. Um, I gotta say, and this might even among my own users, my own customers, this might um, so I might have some frowning on my end, but I have my appreciation for and respect for the teams, the dev teams at Airbnb and Verbo have dramatically changed over the last couple of years.
How so?
Airbnb originally was not um, partner integration PM friendly at all. It really fought that. And I think that was part of their just a transition in their DNA. Originally the Air and Airbnb's Air mattress, they were originally about sharing spaces and apartments, and and they saw like the PM world and the vacation rental world as, you should come to us. We're not going to go to you. Um, they were disruptor for sure. And but in the last few years, I think also the pandemic and in the middle of that also caused some of it, because they saw just how angry hosts were at being unilaterally overruled in terms of cancellations and decisions being made from 1,000 miles away about certain regions and all the stuff that happened. Um, we've noticed in our talks with their dev team, some of their business dev people, and we've noticed also in their tooling, because these teams can say whatever they want, but you can see it on the partnership side, the tooling that they bring when they have meetings with us and say, what are your PM's biggest concerns? How can we build something for this? And then they actually build it. You know, I mean, there's been a variety of things that Airbnb has done to turn the ship and be more host friendly in the last year, 2 years. Um, some tools they've come out with, I think, that have been really good. Some experiments that they've done that show that they're listening. One of those that we were actually the only one in North America who had the access to do this, and I think this is still the case, although don't quote me on this, but um, so you can do offline security deposits with Airbnb now. And again, I'm not sure what other competitors you can, other PMSs or channel managers allow that, but we were the first one to beta test that for them, and they do allow it in other regions. But in the U.S. market, I I'm pretty sure we're still the only one. Basically, you can take, in other words, your own offline payments for fees, other things, definitely the security deposit, and it's built into their process. It's not just something they allow legally, but it's actually built in. If you're connected on our side, you actually have some stuff that pops up on the Airbnb checkout pages and the property information saying this unit will collect other fees when you get there. Here's the amount. Here's what you should expect. Um, and that's certainly not the only thing. I think their pet fees, some of the other things they've added recently, are also a result of some of the meetings we've had, just because we were talking to them 3 or 4 months ahead of time. We were beta testing it. And then, here it is. They were talking to us about the timeline of coming out. It came out. Verbo, there's some big things on their side too. They were always obviously a lot more receptive to, um, I think the vacation rental space and needing to meet PMs where they're at, and being willing to do that. Some of the Verbo problems we've seen over the years, I think, are just a result of their size and transitioning between different companies. Some of the acquisitions that happened there, but that team also, I think, has really evolved pretty well the last few years, and there's a lot of stuff they've been listening to. Um, on their side, bringing the integrated PM tools, being able to be your own merchant of record and that sort of thing, down to the little guy. That was really big on Verbo a couple years ago, and that was another one that we were the first beta that did that for them and really pushed on that really hard. Now everybody has that, but basically with one property, you don't have to be an official PM or have 5 properties or 15 or any of that. With any homeowner can be an integrated PM that is a merchant of record, and Verbo will pass the guest credit card across to a system like ours so that the homeowner can basically do their own merchant of record processing if they want.
I think we've arrived at an interesting moment of the industry in which historically the single property owners haven't had access on average. I know this has been your specialty all along, but on average, they haven't had access to the power that a larger property management company has. And that's changing, and it's giving smaller players entirely new potentials. And it's also kind of neat that you, Paul, started your journey with one property, and you now find yourself at this growth stage, but it's all boiling back to the people and these relationships that you formed and these principles that you've defined and shared.
Yeah, 100%. That's very well said. Actually, I hadn't considered it in that light before, but you kind of just made me sit back in my chair and think about it. And the journey does, there are parallels there for sure between starting out with the one, wanting to build, being a little belligerent about, hey, how come I don't have access to these tools? I'll build them. and then being more belligerent because my tools wouldn't interface with what Verbo and then HomeAway during that time period required. And Airbnb didn't even have a phone number at that point. And seeing the journey all the way through. So I certainly don't want to just take personal credit for it, but there's definitely been some walls that have been knocked down, and it's been an interesting, decade.
Belligerence as a virtue.
I'm making it one.
What an interesting note to end on. I was chatting recently with Miller Hawkins, the president of the Vacation Rental Management Association, whose goal this year for the International Conference in Las Vegas in October is a record-shattering 3,000 attendees. And I was talking to Miller about the importance of starting with one. All great vacation rental professionals, we agreed, start with one. One home, one user, one guest. Starting with one is what gets us hooked. And in Paul's case, it's what sparked an entire software company. But the best people in our space are actively figuring out ways to bring that special feeling they have with one to two, and then sometimes to three. But do beware. With more power in technology comes this temptation to scale the intricate and complex nature of one. And in some cases, that's great. But in other cases, it's worth preserving. Growth at all cost can gain you first mover status, but other times, slowly is the fastest way to get to where you want to be. If you resonated with this interview, consider investing in VRMB's 2022 Trends Report, which features technology accelerators as one of our 4 big trends to keep an eye on, to take advantage of, along with plenty of examples and case studies and action items. You can download that report at vrmb.com/trends. And as a teaser for next week, here's Kelly Hill of Done Right Management in McCall, Idaho, explaining what first mover status means to her.
I believe it is the person or company that is either first to market or is the first to make an impression. In my case, it would be that although I wasn't the first one in McCall to ever have a vacation rental, I think my company is one that is recognized with the reputation. And we had a presence here. We had an office, which is very important. There were other management companies in the area that were operating remotely. And I think it's imperative to have a presence there. We wrapped our vehicles. We got to know all of the real estate agents, which was hugely beneficial. I have to say that 90% of my referrals come from other agents in the area, the real estate agents. So yeah, that's what I think. It's the person who is first to have the best reputation.
Until next time.